What if one man's leadership could hold a nation together during its darkest hour? Abraham Lincoln wasn't just the 16th president of the United States. He was a symbol of unity, resilience, and change. After Abraham Lincoln was assassinated on April 14, 1865, a 3-week series of events was held to mourn the death and memorialize the life of the President of the United States. Funeral services, a procession, and lying in state were first held in Washington, D.C., then a funeral train transported Lincoln's remains for over 1,600 miles. For today's adventure, we're following the route of Lincoln's funeral train across New Jersey, starting here in Trenton, New Jersey, then heading to Princeton, New Brunswick, and Jersey City, retracing a powerful journey through history, as well as exploring some of the statues of Lincoln found in our state. Trenton, New Jersey's state capital, was one of the major cities where large crowds gathered along the rail lines. Churches rang bells, buildings were draped in black, and mourners stood quietly, hoping to witness the passing train. Lincoln's funeral train was the first national commemoration of a president's death by railway. Our first stop is at the New Jersey State Museum right here in Trenton. Here on display, you will find this amazing wooden statue of Abraham Lincoln from 1880, created by an unknown American carver. There's also a collection of Civil War flags on exhibit, which were carried into battle by Civil War soldiers of New Jersey, among many other interesting exhibits worth checking out here. The museum also has a cast marquette for the Lincoln Memorial by Roman Bronze Works of New York, commissioned by Hamilton Fish Keene. The New Jersey State Library has wonderful collections of newspaper prints and pictures from the actual funeral train of Abraham Lincoln in 1865, if you're further interested, as well as the Library of Congress. While the train did not hold a long ceremonial stop here in Trenton, thousands came to the rail yards, nearby streets, simply to pay their respects as it passed through the city. From my understanding, the train would have passed through this area here. Our next stop, West Windsor and Princeton, New Jersey. Now, to give a little more context, the train, called and known as the Lincoln Special, left Washington, D.C. on April 21st at 12:30 p.m. It bore Lincoln's eldest son, Robert Todd, and the remains of Lincoln's younger son, Willie, who had died from typhoid fever 3 years earlier at the age of 11. Willie's casket had been held in a vault in the Georgetown Cemetery, awaiting interment in Springfield at the end of Lincoln's presidency, which no one had thought would end so soon. Lincoln's wife, Mary Todd, was too unwell after his death to actually travel on the Lincoln Special. It's understandable with the amount of grief she carried with her losing her children prior to Abraham Lincoln's assassination. The funeral train carried about 150 passengers, including some other family members. And the train largely retraced the route Lincoln had traveled to Washington as president-elect on his way to his first inauguration more than 4 years earlier. My interest of all this started when I was a little girl visiting Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. and the Peterson House, where Abraham Lincoln died on April 15, 1865. It's important to remember that Americans were very grief-stricken over the American Civil War, which had just sort of ended but was still going on in Texas until about August of 1866. At the time of Lincoln's funeral, the Princeton Junction station was only about 2 years old, having opened in 1863 when the railroad's main line was rerouted away from the Delaware and Raritan canals. The Dinky connection, which connects the main line to downtown Princeton, was not operational until 1865, just weeks after the funeral train had passed through the junction. This rail line here was the same corridor used in 1865, not the same tracks, but the corridor. Today, trains rush through here every day, but for a brief moment in 1865, this place became a sacred ground where Princeton mourned Abraham Lincoln. As black draped funeral moved slowly past, going no faster than 20 miles per hour, students and townspeople stood in silence, hats removed, paying their final respects to a fallen president. With mourners gathering near the tracks along the path to the main line near Alexander Road, the majority of mourners would have included students from the College of New Jersey, now known as Princeton University. A few years ago, I visited the National Museum of Funeral History in Texas, and I learned about how advances in the art of embalming during the Civil War had allowed unrefrigerated bodies of tens of thousands of soldiers to be returned to their families for burial. The same process was used for Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln's embalmer, Dr. Charles Brown, injected chemical preservatives into his body. Even with these efforts, the long journey took its toll. And information we have today tells us that embalmers had to retreat and cosmetically maintain Lincoln's body at several stops. They used additional chemicals, cooling methods, and makeup to keep his appearance as suitable as possible for public viewing. Charles Brown proclaimed there would be no change in Lincoln's appearance. William H. Good, the conductor on the funeral train's first leg, recalled that the president appeared to be resting, leaving the national capital. He looked as if he was asleep in pleasant dreams. However, newspaper reports claim that by the time Lincoln's body departed New York City, there were visible signs of decay with his eyes and skin. Lincoln had a metal-lined coffin, and his funeral car was kept as cool as possible to help preserve him during travel. So tell me in the comments down below, have you ever been to this West Windsor train station? And if so, did you know this history? I remember reading somewhere that Albert Einstein also spent some time here at this West Windsor train station, and he would sit here enjoying watching the trains pass through the Northeast Corridor hub. Einstein did have a house here in Princeton. Story for another day. Our next stop, Princeton University. Students would most likely have walked from the campus towards the railroad line to pay respects, with hats off, dressed in black. Classes were, of course, suspended. The train did not stop here in Princeton. There were no speeches, no music, just silence. This was just one of hundreds of local acts of grief nationwide for a fallen president. In 1865, the College of New Jersey was centered right here where Princeton University's main campus still is today, anchored by Nassau Hall. A tremendous amount of history dating back to Revolutionary times right here in Princeton, New Jersey. Princeton University Library actually has on file a handwritten letter from Abraham Lincoln when he was awarded a Doctor of Law degree back in 1864 from the university. Now, Abraham Lincoln wasn't New Jersey's first choice for president back in the 1800s. There was strong Democratic influence, which shouldn't be surprising in New Jersey. Here's something to consider, that even back then, regardless of political differences, New Jersey still displayed a tremendous amount of admiration and respect for the recently fallen president. I thought that our next stop should be Princeton Cemetery. Why the cemetery, you ask? Well, there's an important figure there that I think is worth mentioning. In fact, there's many important people buried right here in Princeton Cemetery. David Hunter was born on July 21st, 1802, died February 2nd, 1886. He became a career military officer in the United States Army. During the American Civil War, he served as Union general, known for strong anti-slavery and bold leadership. His connection to Abraham Lincoln was both important and complex. In 1862, while commanding the Union's Department of the South, General Hunter took a dramatic step. He issued general orders declaring people in Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina to be free as slaves. However, Lincoln did not authorize this move. He was concerned about keeping border states loyal, maintaining constitutional authority. President Lincoln publicly revoked Hunter's order. Lincoln didn't punish Hunter. Instead, the moment helped push Lincoln towards a broader, lawful solution. Months later, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing enslaved people in Confederate-held territory nationwide. Hunter later became one of the Union's first generals to actively recruit and organize black soldiers, a policy Lincoln strongly supported. Also worth mentioning here is that, well, General David Hunter was appointed president of the commission, meaning he oversaw proceedings, maintaining order, and guided the court through one of the most substantial trials in U.S. history. A trial being the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. David Hunter also rode on the funeral train for Mr. Abe Lincoln. Next stop on this journey is New Brunswick, New Jersey. The New Jersey Railroad, chartered in 1832, was completed between Jersey City and New Brunswick around 1835, and then in 1836, the first train traveled from Newark. When Abraham Lincoln's train rolled through New Brunswick, in April of 1865, it may have been on tracks a little bit more north of this current station. Now, I'm not a historian. I'm just gathering information, and there's a lot of information located here right in New Brunswick about the railroad that you can learn about yourself. These here posted signs talk about the New Brunswick station and the detailed history of it. I love to see history posted and people being able to learn as they walk by on the day-to-day. It's pretty cool. So once again, thousands of people would have lined the tracks in both Princeton and New Brunswick and Trenton to pay respects as the train made its way through to Jersey City. I'm going to take you on our next stop, Jersey City, New Jersey. Massive crowds would have filled the area, many arriving by ferry and rail just to witness the beginning of Lincoln's funeral ride across America. Standing here today, surrounded by modern trains, skyline views, it's hard to imagine the deep silence that once covered the city as a grieving nation stood by. Now, I came here specifically to see the plaque that the Lincoln Association dedicated here on Owen Grundy Pier, where Lincoln's casket was sent off on the ferry boat. I couldn't find pictures of this sign anywhere online, so I said I have to come and see it for myself. As I mentioned before, Lincoln wasn't really well received in New Jersey when he was alive, and the state was the only one in the North that didn't vote for him in the 1864 presidential election. Jersey City voted for Lincoln in like one district that year. Yet church bells tolled, guns sounded, people sang as they mourned to watch President Lincoln's body on the ferry cross the Hudson to Manhattan. When Lincoln's body arrived via train at the depot on April 24th, 1865, it was 3 minutes past 10, but the clock in the station had been stopped at 7:22. The time of Lincoln's death on April 15th. Nearly 3 weeks after Lincoln died, he was finally laid to rest in Oak Ridge Cemetery in Springfield, Illinois. One day I'll get there to visit, one day. There's a whole other story I could share about that and his burial and reburial. Very interesting. So that was Lincoln's funeral train journey, but our next journey is in here in Freehold. I thought it'd be interesting to show you some of the Lincoln statues that we have here in New Jersey. I think there's about 5. This one here in Freehold, New Jersey. It's located outside the Monmouth County Courthouse. Sculpted in the early 1960s by Maurice Podell. I think I said that right. He sometimes made sculptures with bread dough instead of clay. So this is an interesting one, standing here. And so I recommend you come check it out if you're interested in Abe Lincoln like I am. There's also statues of Abe in Jersey City, East Orange, and Newark, to my understanding. But right here in Middlesex, New Jersey, there's a very famous statue, actually, that is very interesting to me because it's one of the oldest. Middlesex, New Jersey used to be called, actually, Lincoln. Silas Dewey Drake purchased land from John D. Voorhees. He divided the land for homes and industry. He also helped procure an area where he could memorialize his idol, good old Honest Abe. Memorial Day 1889, a bronze statue Drake purchased for $700 from an Ohio-based company was dedicated to this railroad station here on Lincoln Boulevard. So, because of Drake, the southern west part of Piscataway Township became known as Lincoln. And that only lasted about 15 years until 1913, and then it became Middlesex Borough. Let me know in the comments down below if you've ever passed this statue or if you're familiar with the background story about it. The Middlesex Borough Library has documentation about this particular statue and the town of Lincoln. So as we learned today, even though the train only passed through New Jersey, the people of the state came together in respect, unity, and grief, leaving behind a powerful piece of history still felt today. Thanks for joining me on today's adventure. Thanks for coming along. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and notification bell. And don't forget to keep it moving.